Very good morning, friends. Just before we start and get into the program flow, I just want to talk about the concept here that the next 45 minutes to 50 minutes we will be more focused on aluminium, zinc, and a little bit of lead in terms of its outlook. And once we finish that, we've got a very engaging session on copper. Copper markets is, demand-supply outlook, pricing, and so on and so forth. So these are two segments, and I think it's going to be, the next hour and a half is going to be extremely engaging and interesting. So I'll request all of you to take your seats so that we can get started. Now, the previous session that we had this morning was intense discussion on the policy tweaks that are happening globally and how that is going to impact India. We are now slowly going to veer towards the business side of it. We will deep dive into metals outlook on aluminium, copper, and lead. We would also study zinc. We have a presentation on that. And as I always say that the fortunes of the secondary metal industry are very, very closely linked to the performance of the automotive sector here in India. So we have a wonderful presentation from the country's largest secondary aluminium smelter, who's going to talk about the current landscape and what the future entails as far as the automotive side is concerned. Finally, we would wrap up with a question and answer session. But before all this happens, we are extremely lucky to have Mr. Shakil Alam here, who's the Chief Economic Advisor at the Ministry of Mines. His inputs today on the policy front will allow our industry to visualize its future. But before I invite him, I just want to make a couple of points. Today, the Indian non-ferrous metals industry is valued at approximately $18 billion and is projected to reach about $30 billion in the next 5-6 years. We have earlier spoken about several green shoots like renewable energy, automotive, packaging, etc., which promise a huge potential for our sector as sustainability and decarbonization takes center stage in consumption. We are preparing ourselves to meet the new demand in terms of quality, quantity, output. But there is one big problem central to all the materials that we have spoken about, which is really challenging, and that is the raw materials. You see, today we have a very import-centric ecosystem, and country after country, block after block, are trying to create a perimeter which sort of allows those raw materials, that green resource material, to stay within, so as to they can resurrect, they can empower their own industries and make sure that they are in the right trajectory of economic growth. This makes us this puts us in a very difficult position today because of the low consumption base that we've had here. We don't have enough scrap in the country, and about almost, I would say, close to between 60 and 70%, depending on the sector that we look at, we are dependent on imports. So while as an industry we try to adjust and adapt, there are forces within as well who are trying to sort of create these, I would say, non-tariff barriers for us. We're talking about primary producers who want that the imports need to be controlled. We need to have very strict standards on this. I think in the end, it's an attempt to decimate the vibrancy of our industry, to, I guess, while their production is increasing and they want to make sure that they have every bit of application well covered, but I think it cannot come at the cost of the vibrancy of this particular industry. So I would leave Mr. Shakil Alam to sort of address those issues. I now would like to call upon all our presenters and panelists to come up on stage. First, I would invite Mr. Shakil Alam to come up on the stage and take his seat. Next on, I would request Mr. Mohan Agarwal the Managing Director of CMR Green, to come up on stage. I would now like to invite Kunal Shah from Nirmal Bang to come up on stage. He's going to be presenting the outlook on metals. And finally, I would like to invite Mr. Anirudh Junjunwala, my colleague in MRAI board and the director at JG Chemicals. He's going to talk to us about zinc. So without taking more time, I would ask our chair today, Mr. Shakil Alam, to walk us through with his ideas and direction for our industry. Mr. Alam. Oh, sorry, we also have one, my colleague from BIR, Mr. Paul Coite. He is the director at Hayes Metal. He represents, he's from all the way from New Zealand. He's here to give his inputs on global trade. So Paul, please welcome.
Industry leaders and stalwarts from across the world, both on and off the dais, Mr. Dhaval Shah, Mr. Kunal Shah, Mr. Mohan Agarwal, Mr. Anirudh Junjunwala, Mr. Paul Coite were on the dais. Other stakeholders of the metal recycling industry present here on the occasion, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be a part of the International Material Recycling Conference, which is a flagship forum organized by MRAI, and I applaud MRAI for that. This session is going to be interesting, and I look forward to it. Initially, let me briefly mention a few facts about India's economy, which I'm sure most of you already know. India is the 5th largest economy in the world, and being the fastest growing among major economies, will become the 3rd largest in another 2 to 3 years' time. India has a strong external sector with over $640 billion of forex reserves, $70 billion of annual FDI inflows, and $1.5 trillion of foreign trade happening. India also has a strong entrepreneurship ecosystem, having about 117 unicorns, which is the 3rd highest in the world. India is a consumer powerhouse with 400 million middle-class population, 1.5 billion mobile phones in use, which is the 2nd largest in the world, and 950 million internet users, again 2nd largest in the world. All this point to a scenario of a thriving economy, with more resources called into production. No doubt, India is high on resource endowment and a global leader in production in minerals like iron ore, limestone, and bauxite, which feed the most important of industries, steel, cement, and aluminium, which drive economic activity. However, at the same time, how these mineral resources are activated is important, going by the sheer scale of resource use in our country. Which brings me to the theme of this session, recycling. Friends, speaking about the non-ferrous metal recycling industry, one is to associate with its role in achieving sustainable metal production. For instance, as you all know, aluminium smelting is a highly energy-intensive process. 1 ton of primary aluminium probably requires about 14,000 units of electricity. But on the other hand, aluminium produced through the remelting route using aluminium scrap material uses about 1/7 that amount of energy. This variation is important for us not to ignore, since energy efficiency is the key to an efficiently run economy. Having said that, the recycling rates in India are low, in the range of 30 to 40%, say for aluminium, and maybe much lower in other non-ferrous metals. We have to aim at increasing the recycling rates to at least 50 to 60% in under 20 to 25 years of time. And to achieve this, we need a roadmap which should address the hurdles facing the recycling sector today. Let me use this opportunity to outline a few. One, we have to improve the recyclable waste collection in India. And for that, we need maybe to offer incentives to urban local bodies and their various agencies which are employed by the urban local bodies, and also to the general public through innovative structures. There are, of course, several examples we found for such measures from outside India, in US or in UK, Europe, and even in Asia. And we can probably study them and also adopt a few of them. Another important aspect is how we can formalize the NFM scrap ecosystem. Here, the issue of fake invoices is important, and there are measures one need to take in regulation and in strict enforcement and in the use of IT tools. The major hurdle I feel in formalizing the scrap economy is the hesitation to do so, and how we can overcome that. Well, one can explore a few steps like setting up cooperatives for informal recyclers and making them viable. We can offer incentives for inclusion by the informal recyclers, and we can also offer occupational recognition and have certification of skills for the informal sector workers. Friends, an important aspect is supply chain resilience, especially in the context of import reliance in several NFM scrap lines like aluminium and maybe even zinc scrap. Elimination of import duties has been spoken about in other platforms as well. I'm not going to repeat here. Then there is, of course, EU, which is restricting scrap shipment outside of OECD. We'll need to find ways and means to overcome this. We also need to be aggressive outside. Our big recyclers can acquire sorting recycling units overseas, especially in the US, UK, EU, and even probably in UAE. It is possible that the usual import sources like EU may somewhat dry up, but we need to explore other avenues as well. We need to explore policy options in India whereby scrap generation in the country improves, which brings me to the need to have a multi-pronged approach for integrating recycling into our society through R&D and education, skilling and awareness. Here, of course, MRI is a very old, established, organization for the recycling industry in India, and probably I would say that MRI should think of having an independent R&D center or an institute, and even a skilling center or an institute, which will help the recycling industry in India. As far as education is concerned, we can think of internships in recycling and industry-sponsored chairs in educational institutes. We also need to focus on the right course structures in our educational institutes, on skill assessment and anticipation studies for skilling among the recycling workers, and on awareness efforts like recycling drives. In fact, I recollect that 80 recycling drives were organized in the year 2022, and it had a good reception. So I think we should be repeating this exercise often. There is a NFM recycling framework of the Ministry of Mines. Under this, several actions have already been initiated and should see the light of the day in this year. Some important ones probably would include online platform for auction or sale of scrap, creating urban mine centers, identifying recycling zones, and evaluation and ranking of recycling units. So with this, I think I've overshot my time as well. So with this, I'll end here, and probably I'll make some intervention afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Shakir Alam. I think you've touched upon some very big points. You've talked about improving recycling rates, an effort being made to convert the informal sector, bring them to the formal sector, education and skilling you emphasized a lot, and making recycling as a part of every Indian's daily life. I think that was the message there. So thank you so much, and for all the support that Ministry of Mines is giving us on this. And we as industry, we as a group, MRAI, we certainly are going to walk along with the thought process that you've given here and the direction. Moving on, I would say that while the industry has grown, I think there is one big impact that we've had since 2018, once the trade war started, is the volatility. I think if you look at yearly movements in terms of metals, I think we as recyclers have really, I think one of the biggest challenges is how to manage this volatility while our businesses grow. COVID brought its own challenges. We came out of COVID, we tried to reboot, replug, but then there was another set of challenges that came in the form of geopolitical scenarios, armed conflicts. Last year and even this year, the shipping logistics, the general shipping logistics routes that we had, because being import-centric, we also export a bit. I think everything kind of looked very turbulent, and we still try to sort of, cope up with that. We've had currency situations, we've had interest rates. All in all, I would say that while business goes, we want to improve our businesses, I think all of these external factors have all of a sudden got in and have become an integral part of business. I remember the time when I joined business, what was told to me is that for the next 2 years, I'm only going to study demand and supply fundamentals. I think today if I take a new trader, I would say keep those fundamentals aside, just follow these daily situations and try to do your business, create your space in terms of in the period of this volatility. So it's very important to sort of get an outlook in terms of what's coming up next. And to do that, I'm going to invite Kunal Shah, he's the head of research at Kunal Bank, to give us his perspective in terms of what entails this industry, what is the future on aluminium, copper and lead. Kunal, welcome.
So first of all, thanks to MRAI. I've been a part of MRAI from many years, and it's a great pleasure. And it's a big success for them. Very glad to see the way the conference has been scaling up. So big hands to MRAI, Dawal Bhai, and every member who have taken this effort. So I'll start with my topic. Yeah. Is it? It's not coming. Winds of change, shift of power from west to east. That's the theme we are focusing on, and we'll be covering the outlook on various metals post that. So like what Dawal Bhai said, I think the traditional factors driving, so earlier all the conferences which we used to do in MRAI, and we used to come up with the outlook on metals, we used to focus on what's happening in the China, what is the refined metals outlook, what is the demand scenario, what is the supply scenario, what are the treatment and refining charges and all of those stuff, and determining the outlook of metals on basis of that. But gone are those days. Now we are in a completely different world post-COVID, and after the Trump, and we are seeing a total change in the way the price dynamics takes place. So I'll just start my presentation. Sir, coming on screen. So 2025, I think macro events will dominate over the actual demand and supply of the metals. So the major is the economic warfare. So unfortunately, the wars are being fought on the electronic front instead of actual war being played out. So on one side, there is Russia, Ukraine going on, but what's happening on the electric market? The best example of that, what we saw 2 days back. So suddenly a Chinese AI came up and wiped out $1.5 trillion, which is the size of Spain's economy, in a matter of 1 day. So one app came up, 5 days, $20 million of investment, wiped out $1.5 trillion. So this is the kind of disruption what we are seeing. Remember the fact that US has been constantly trying that this kind of technology doesn't go to China. And in spite of that, we have seen this kind of disruption. So yeah, so the presentation has started. So this is the actual scenario. I mean, Mr. Trump is coming and showing, is thwarting everyone, from all the Latin American countries to Asian economies to everyone. Everyone has to obey him, otherwise he'll impose tariff. So this is the state of the world today. So right now, the major change which is happening in Asia is more than 80 countries are participating, trading in their own currencies. So 80 countries are planning and doing trades in currency X dollar. So this is the big change happening. So the entire power is shifting from the west to east. So for all of you, the recyclers and the extrusion guys and the metal producers and consumers, so the demand is shifting from west to east quite predominantly, not just China, but ex-China. Worsening geopolitical scenario, slowdown in China, causing for big actions in future. And Trump, you know, this is one of the major things. Trump planning to create Bitcoin reserves. I mean, can you imagine US foreign exchange reserve get diverted into Bitcoin? Asset class no one will understand the demand and supply. In that, US aims to have their own government reserve. So it's insane. Entire Asia is buying gold. Entire Asia Pacific is buying gold. All the Latin American countries are buying gold. Russia is buying gold. China is buying gold. And US, they are focusing on creating a Bitcoin reserve. So this is a big paradox which is happening. So because of this economic war, the BRICS bloc is rising very tall right now. So what we are seeing is what happens on the 1st of February, nobody knows. What Mr. Trump is going to do, is going to put a tariff or no tariff. But one thing is very clear, his entire 3 years, 4 years are going to be volatile and unpredictable. So one day he will say, I'm not going to put tariff on China. The other day he'll come and say, okay, I'll put 10% tariff on China. So what are you going to do about it? We saw what happened with the Colombia, I think. Colombia, the deportation of the immigrants took place. And suddenly overnight, you know, he came up and said that if you don't deport, we'll put 25% tariff. And in 1 week, that tariff will go to 50%. So now this is an economic warfare which is taking place. So how the demand and supply is going to dominate? What will happen to all the metals? So what is happening is nobody knows how much tariff will be charged on which commodity or which products. So we are in a total black swan right now. So like what I was talking about, the DeepSeek sunk $1.5 trillion in a matter of 1 day. One thing is very sure, in this economic warfare where the US, Russia, everyone has been involved, China is silent and China is silently progressing. China is progressing on the AI front. China is now in electronic vehicle. They are the largest manufacturers of the EVs. So China is right now clearly winning the war in very, they are not making fuss about it, but they are winning this quite with a big margin. So the future of BRICS bloc looks very bright. Forget about India, China, 13 new countries joins BRICS, and now BRICS accounts for $30 trillion. BRICS bloc is now $30 trillion worth economy. And this is where the demand of ferrous, when you look about the demand growth drivers, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Africa, these are going to be the demand drivers for the metals. We are not going to see 5% demand growth in US, Europe, or any part of the world. So every time we think about China demand growth have come down from 5% to 3% to 2%. This is being totally made up by rising BRICS bloc, where India, the demand growth of most of these metals are 8 to 10%. So we are growing at a rapid pace. All the other economies consisting in BRICS bloc are doing well. So these are the big changes which is happening. Now look at this chart. This is very interesting. So if you look at the global economy last year, it was a $105 trillion global economy with US at 27 trillion and China at 20 trillion. So as per the latest report by Goldman Sachs, China by 2050 will be $42 trillion economy, US will be $37 trillion economy, and India will be $22 trillion of economy. So you can imagine this kind of disruption is taking place. After a century, this kind of disruptions are taking place where the power is shifting to east. We are the one who are going to determine what is the outlook on commodity pricing. And we are going to decide the price. We are going to be the price makers as an entire east continent. And the demand growth is not just going to come from China, it is going to come from countries ex-China in Asia Pacific. So maybe India or maybe like the countries which I mentioned. So the entire power is shifting. And that's where this tariff and all comes. Why there is tariff? Every day there is a talk of tariff. They don't have anything. Their debt is soaring like anything. US debt is, this last year, US debt shot up by $3 trillion. So what they are going to do? They are trying to disrupt the growth of the growing economies by doing all these things. Whether they'll succeed or not, that's a different issue. But the East will continue to dominate the demand. So now this is the best example of what is happening between East and West. So if you look at the US 10-year bond yields, they've been constantly moving up with the rising inflationary expectation. And you look at the China's 10-year bond yield, which is continuously going down, it's a posting deflationary scenario. Can you imagine? So US, if they want to print money, they cannot print money because the inflation will shoot up. They won't be able to service their debt. But China, right now the bond yields are at historic lows. If they want to come up with a stimulus package, they have not given any stimulus in last 5 years. They can come with a $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion stimulus easily. And what will happen to US inflation after that? So China is in a wait and watch game. They just want to see what US does. And believe me, they are ready with more RRR cuts and they'll be ready with more and more stimulus going forward. So while the outlook of the China's construction sector remains pessimistic, but the overall 2%, 2.5% demand growth will continue to be there. I'm running out of time, so I'm just coming to the main part, the aluminum. The aluminum market is, if you look at the fundamental, no major change. It is in a very minute surplus. The demand majorly is coming from the auto sector, transport industry. In 2020, it was 22%. Right now, it accounts for 28% in China. So this is the major demand driver for aluminum. And you see, Asia Pacific is accounting for the 66% of the demand growth. So going forward, what we expect is that China at some point will come up with RRR cuts and stimulus package. So forget about the fundamentals, the demand and supply. Metal prices should do well from February or March onwards. I'm expecting a bull run to take place, not because of the demand and supply, because of China may come up with a stimulus and a lot of RRR cuts, liquidity infusion in the economy to prop up the economy. The outlook on zinc remains little pessimistic because a lot of new supplies, a lot of new mine supplies from Africa is coming this year on stream. China is going to cut the steel production aggressively this year because in China there is a stability in the real estate sector, but the new construction are not taking place. So we believe that fundamentals of zinc are not very bullish because the galvanizing demand will drop this year. So we expect that the gap between lead and zinc should shorten. Lead should do better in terms of the price rise as compared to zinc, and lead has a better prospect to do well in this year as compared to zinc. But this is not about demand and supply, my friends. This is about the economic warfare, and China and US are fighting it right now, and China is in a very better position, and I'm assuming the bull run to continue this year also. So my outlook on overall base metals is upbeat, not because of the demand and supply, because of I'm expecting policy actions from China, and that will support the prices of metals. So thank you very much, MRAI, and I hope I have provided some value to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunal. I think if I've got that right, I think the central theme and the message for us is that volatility and unpredictability remains, and Nostradamus' crystal ball is now on one side looking at Mr. Trump, and on the other side it's looking for answers from the Chinese DeepSeek AI, which has created so much of chaos in today's world. Moving forward, as I said before, that the fortunes of every secondary metal recycler and allied industry, the base of this, the performance of it is deeply connected with the automotive segment. And we've got a massive transformation in terms of the last 5 years. If you follow the automotive segment here, if I purely talk in terms of output, from about 3 million, passenger vehicles has shot to 4.3 million. Of course, the last 5 years have also brought in a very big change in terms of how we look at mobility with the introduction of electric vehicles, and particularly the growth rate, again, that I covered in my yesterday's presentation. While internal combustion engines, the ICEs, continue to grow at double digits, but the percentage of electric vehicles is beyond 25%. So that basically sets the tone in terms of how Indians look at electric mobility, or how they look at automotive sector in times to come. And for this, we are very lucky to have Mr. Mohan Agarwal to come and give us his presentation on the automotive segment, what is the current landscape, and what exactly it would mean for the secondary aluminium industry in India over the next 5 years. Mr. Agarwal.
Thanks, Dhaval. Mr. Shakil Alam, RP Gupta ji, friends, I'm happy to make this presentation. I'll be speaking on secondary aluminium and what it is going to draw for the automotive industry. A little about CMR. We are the largest aluminium recycler in the country. We're actually rated as number 5 in the world now outside China, and we look forward to going to number 4 in this year. Next, please. Oh, I can do it from here? Thank you. So, first, if you see the overall GDP, in that manufacturing accounts for about 14%, and half of that is taken up by automotive. Even though the automotive's total contribution is not so large to the overall GDP, but automotive does drive the GDP. If the automotive is doing well, the GDP does well. Looking at the sales and the production in the last few years, we saw 18-19 as the top production in India, with a total production of over 26 million vehicles, taken up largely by the two-wheelers with 21 million. After that, we already were seeing a decline in auto production before the pandemic struck, and then the auto went down. As of last year, we have seen cars, two-wheelers and three-wheelers, they have either caught up or exceeded the pre-pandemic levels of 18-19. Two-wheelers still, even though they've been growing at a CAGR of 15%, they still have a catch-up to do to go to 21 million and over. The aluminium usage in cars is about 55-60 kgs on an average in India, while in the world it is nearly 210 kg. Over the next 4 or 5 years, we should see it go to 237 by the year 20, okay. I can't read it. Anyway, by 2030, it should go to about 256, which is a 24% increase in the aluminium usage. What you see on the right-hand side is, I've tried to make a comparison that we have the same technologies as, say, the world for our automobiles. Then why our aluminium consumption is so low as compared to the world? So I've tried to answer that. We have done a component-wise breakup of how much each is weighing. Like the engine is about 42 kgs against 26 kgs in India. Well, the main reason for this difference is that we are still predominantly an entry-level market, with 70% of the automobile sales being taken up by entry-level cars, hatchbacks particularly. But I think that is going to change with time and going to change soon. If we come to EV, here I'm going to show you a comparison in two ways. One is this is a component level comparison. In the ICE vehicle to EV, we're going to see a 70% increase in aluminium consumption. What will go out is the engine for the EV and the transmission. It is going to be replaced by one light weighing. Firstly, it is the battery pack, which will eat up a lot of aluminium cast and sheets. Another major area is going to be body structure and closure. So light weighing is going to be the major theme which is going to draw this. In aluminium, if I go product-wise, which means the cast aluminium, the sheet aluminium and the extrusion, cast aluminium we will see is nearly the same. From about 76 kgs, it goes to 79 kgs. So nearly, but the good news is that cast aluminium, we have a very big feedstock of cast available in the world. So we are in business. We'll continue to recycle that and put it to useful use. Then another, on the sheet, that is going to be the most major increase in closures. The body, door, window, doors and bodies. And the battery trays is also going to use a lot of sheet. And the next one, which is not so big as sheet, is the extrusion, which is going to be used more and more in this structure. So all this is about light weighing the situation, light weighing the vehicle, sorry. We look at the overall secondary aluminium market in the country. In 2023, we were at 1.6 million tons. 1.7, I'm sorry, I cannot read it from here. So we expect it to grow about 7 to 9%, and we should go to about over 2.2, 2.4 million tons. If I come, auto in that is constituting about 40%, which should go to about 45% by the year 2028 in the next 4 to 5 years. In the passenger cars, a shift to EV, and also because in the country there is going to be a premiumization where a more higher level of cars will be sold. So that is also with higher percentage of aluminium. So those two are going to increase aluminium consumption in passenger cars. In the two-wheelers, we should see it go up from 0.4 to 0.6. Commercial vehicles, nearly the same, not much change. Three-wheelers also nearly the same, not much change. So finally, this is my last slide, and what is really going to drive the aluminium consumption in the automotive sector is First, we have the market growth. We are going to see a 5 to 7% market growth in the automotive sector. Apart from the growth, we will also see, so it will mean a growth both for the primary and the secondary. The second is the EV revolution. So EV revolution is going to put in, So EV revolution, we expect that will increase for the cars, the EV we expect to go from about under 1% at this moment of time. So of the total population, about 10-15% will be made from EVs. On the two-wheelers, we are going to see a much larger penetration. We expect about 50% of the two-wheelers to go to EV. So with a higher consumption of aluminium, we would see a much higher growth in the secondary aluminium consumption. Premiumization, where India is shifting a lot to SUVs, which currently are now accounting as much as 45% of the total sales of passenger vehicles. So that trend should continue, and those SUVs have 120 kgs aluminum content as compared to the 50-60 kgs in the entry-level cars. Then lightweighting we have talked about. As we go into EV, that is what is going to happen. Localization, this is very interesting because the government of India also is providing a lot of regulatory support. They want to promote Make in India. And with the increasing costs in other economies, especially in China, more and more components are now being sourced from within the country. So that's also going to give a boost to secondary aluminium consumption in the country. And last, sustainability, the increased focus of circularity by the government. They're really supporting us through various EPR regulations. I think the EPR on automobile is kind of around the corner, so we should see it very soon. So that is also going to help the growth of secondary aluminium. So overall, over the next 4 to 5 years, I definitely see a 7 to 11% growth in this sector in our country. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mohanji, for those insights. I think the message is very clear. Overall, 7 to 11% growth, that's very positive. And also, as a growing India, as aspirational India turns more towards the lightweighting and electric mobility, that means more recycled aluminium being used in automotive, and that means a better, positive outlook for the secondary aluminium industry here. Moving on, you see, year after year, we do conferences and we have several commodity discussions. I think one of the commodities, perhaps, which I would say is that doesn't remain so much in focus, but despite the fact that it's a very big industrial commodity, you see most of our discussions in metal section is dominated by copper and aluminium, but there's not too much of attention being paid to zinc as a commodity, and today we wanted to cover that. We wanted to have deep insight. And as you understand that zinc, in terms of its basic applications, you see, it is in the supply chain to some of the core industries. Steel, of course, is dominating, but there are so many other industrial applications which are so necessary for a country, for an economy, like tires, paints, pharma, where zinc finds its application. So to talk more about that, I'm going to invite my colleague and the director at JG Chemicals, the country's largest zinc recycler, Anirudh Junjunwala, to come up here and address this audience.
Thanks, Dhaval, and thanks for putting zinc on focus. It's a commodity which very rarely finds place in multi-commodity conferences, so thanks for that. To begin with, Shri Shakil Alamji, dignitaries on and off the dais, and my friends and colleagues from the recycling fraternity. A very good morning to all of you and welcome to this session today. what I'm going to try and do is give you a deep dive into zinc and how, more specifically, secondary zinc behaves in the Indian landscape. Now, I must confess, I'm not a certified diver, but I will try to make sure that I can give you maximum value on this commodity. Just a little introduction about ourselves. I stand before you here as the Managing Director of JG Chemicals. As Dhaval rightly mentioned, we are the largest zinc recycling company in India and also the largest manufacturer of zinc oxide in Asia outside of China. We obviously aim to break into the top 5 in times to come globally. We also manufacture zinc sulfate, and our unit is a closed-loop circularity unit in the sense that whatever scraps we take, we either consume in manufacture of zinc oxide or the balanced residues goes into manufacture of zinc sulfate. Recently, we were listed on the Indian Stock Exchange, and we are proud to say that we have some good names, international names, as our investors. So, ladies and gentlemen, coming to zinc, as I mentioned, it is a critical component in sustainability. So, to begin with, what is sustainability? It's obviously, in today's time, it has not remained just a buzzword. It is not a cost increase to just protect the environment. Today, when we speak of sustainability, it means ensuring reuse of waste resource to create a product which is more sustainable than use of virgin metal. Use virgin metal for that. This significantly reduces the carbon footprint, and we will see how this transforms into zinc also. And also to assure minimum usage of resource to create a product as per specification. This is what you call resource efficiency and how your yields can increase. So net, it's a profit center and not a cost center. Just to give you an idea about what secondary zinc is. In simplistic terms, secondary zinc is the scrap, the waste which arises out of use of primary zinc. What are the different forms of secondary zinc today? We have zinc dross, which arises out of continuous and hot dip galvanizing. There are different kinds of zinc drosses, namely top and bottom drosses. We have zinc ash and skimming, which also arises out of hot dip galvanizing. We have used roofing zinc sheets. These sheets are not, unfortunately, available in India. It's usually used in cold countries where there is snow. So when old sheets are changed and new sheets come in, the old sheets come as used roofing zinc sheets. We have remelted zinc ingots, which are produced by melting zinc skimmings and other forms of zinc scrap. We have die-cast zinc scrap, again, which arises out of scrappage of automotive components and building hardware. Just to get an idea about the sustainability index of recycled zinc or secondary zinc, if you look at this slide, you would see there is almost a 73% reduction in energy consumption when you use secondary zinc vis-a-vis primary zinc. There is approximately an 82% reduction in carbon footprint. My friends, this is huge today. And any government or any policy which will propagate use of primary zinc, where actually secondary zinc can be used, is actually would be a kind of evil to mankind, I would say, if I were to put it strongly. What are the uses of secondary zinc? As Dhaval was mentioning, zinc also finds use in a lot of our day-to-day activities. We use one of the major uses of zinc, secondary zinc, is production of zinc oxide, which we do. Zinc oxide is a critical raw material which is used in rubber, paints, tires, ceramics, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics. We also use zinc, secondary zinc, in production of zinc sulfate, which is an important micronutrient today in our agriculture. Our soils in many parts of India are still zinc deficient. In order to remove that zinc deficiency, we need to add zinc sulfate to our soils. Secondary zinc is also used in galvanizing baths, added and used in combination with primary zinc. It is used to coat and galvanize steel. It is also used in brass handicrafts to make brass alloys, which in turn handicrafts are produced from that. That generates a lot of rural employment also. Now let us look at a bit on the recycling technology which the zinc sector has imbibed in India, and how does it fare when you compare it to the world. I must tell you that having had the privilege of traveling extensively and visiting zinc facilities all around the world, today when I see our facilities in India compared to some of the best names in the world, is it Europe or US, we find that our facilities are sometimes far more modern and far more equipped than our facilities abroad. We use one of the most advanced recycling techniques wherein we try to substitute secondary zinc, for which instead of primary in producing grades of zinc oxide and grades of zinc products where globally primary zinc is used, thereby reducing the carbon footprint substantially. Our facilities are quite environmentally friendly. It is an orange category unit. It's not a red category. And also, our facilities have zero liquid discharge. Whatever scrap comes in is used to produce, say, for example, zinc oxide. What residues arises out of that is separated to form zinc skimmings and fines. The fines are used for sulfate, and the skimmings find back use in the zinc furnaces itself. So it's a very closed-loop circular technology where there is hardly any waste generation. Now let us look at the demand-supply side of it. Do we really need imports? The question is, we all say we need imports, but why? This slide will show you why today imports is a critical component of the survival of the zinc industry. See, as far as zinc dross and drosses are concerned, we use about approximately 1 lakh tons, about 94,000 tons. In India, the arising is only about 50,000 odd tons, so we are importing 38,000 tons. Zinc ash and skimmings, we import about 21,000 tons. Die-cast scraps, we are importing about 32,000 tons. Roofing sheets, it's not available in India. We are importing about 12,500 tons annually. So, today India has an import duty on zinc scraps. We need to ensure free and fair movement of scraps within India and even from outside India. If we do not have sufficient zinc scraps available in the country, what are we going to do? We are going to substitute it with primary zinc. This is going to raise the cost of living. Why I say this? Your tires are going to go more expensive. Your cosmetics will become more expensive. Your fertilizers will become more expensive. Our soils will remain zinc deficient. So net, there is a need to have secondary zinc in the system. Till we are self-sufficient in generation of zinc, secondary zinc, we feel imports are a must. And why are we so deficient in zinc today? Today, if you look at globally, our zinc consumption, per capita zinc consumption, is hardly 0.5 kgs. When you compare it to the rest of the world, it's about 4 kgs. Our car bodies are still not fully galvanized. Our TMT rods are not galvanized. So friends, we have a long way to go before we can say that we are sufficient or self-sufficient in secondary zinc in India. If we do not have this, we will not be able to build scale and prepare ourselves for the future needs of the recycling industry as and when we become self-sufficient. Yesterday we were having a conversation with the Niti Aayog people, and we discussed that it is so important for the officials, for the government officials to actually come and see the processes, see what scrap is, what are the different kinds of scrap. All scraps are not the same. If I talk about zinc scraps, they are extremely clean scraps. There is no issue of collection. I can safely say that 99% of the zinc scrap which is generated in India is actually collected. It is processed, for example, dross is processed in galvanizing plants at a bath temperature of about 450-500 degrees. Do you think there is a chance of any hazardous item remaining in that? I don't think so. The quality is very consistent from plant. In spite of all this, and in spite of zinc scraps being a very clean cargo, there is a lot of regulations around it in terms of storage, in terms of transportation. Today, within a country, we have different countries. Different state pollution control boards have put in different norms for transportation of zinc scrap. I request authorities to kindly standardize this. Even in countries in Europe, zinc is stored in open yards, it is transported in open trailers. Then why so much of regulation in India for a commodity which is fairly clean in nature? I will not dwell more on the EU waste regulation. Dhaval has already spoken about it. So I will end by saying that for every recycler in the room today, our motto is definitely efficiency and use of resource to the last mile, resulting in economic progress through sustainability. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think I've overshot my time a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Anirudh, for walking us through to the scale, size, the performance, the landscape of the zinc industry, and the kind of passion and the energy that you put into that presentation. I can assure you one thing, that zinc is going to be a routine feature of all our commodity sessions. We're coming to the last segment, that is the question and answers. I'll open it up in a bit to the audience as well, but I'd prepared some questions for some of our panelists and presenters here, so I'm just going to straight away dive into that. We're running short of time, so I'm going to make this very quick. As I told you in the beginning, in the introduction, that we have Paul Coite, all the way from New Zealand. Paul, I have a question for you. You are also a colleague of mine and president of the Non-Ferrous board in BIR, and you have a big team representing about 20 countries and blocks. All this discussion regarding restrictions on exports, what is the buzz in that room when you sit with, taking inputs from all these different countries? How does it impact the free trade? And also the fact that you represent the Asia-Pacific Rim, you come from New Zealand and you work a lot in Australia as well. Country-specific, block-specific, what is the outlook when Australia and New Zealand look at their scrap? Are they also looking in the direction that the others are looking?
Thanks. Hello, I got it now. Thanks to all for your question. I think it's not so much a buzz in the room at the moment in the non-ferrous board, it's more a level of concern as it goes from globalization to localization and the real risks and implications for recyclers. I mean, the obvious argument is that in Europe you cannot consume the amount of aluminium that's generated, and here's a country that obviously needs the secondary aluminium, as we've heard in the presentations. So why it's going to have further restrictions on it. And the biggest concern is if the EU doesn't agree with the scrap categories for the importation, what happens then? So it is a big concern. More specific to Australia and New Zealand, there's less of a concern there because it's there isn't the domestic, there isn't the same level of domestic consumption, so it must be exported. But really, things should be exported wherever it makes most sense to be sent, regardless of what's in a specific country. I mean, you've got world-class facilities for zinc, and there's no zinc sheets in India, so why not be sending them here?
So free trade, free economy is the basic message there. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Moving on, I'll put a question to Mr. Shakir Alam. So we've introduced EPRs and aluminium, perhaps in metals case. I think aluminium will be the first one to sort of be implemented there. But sir, as an advisor to Ministry of Mines, have you looked at introducing a minimum recycled content in terms of product design? You see in every forum, in every meeting, we pay so much of focus on recycling and circular economy. When do you think where India can seamlessly adapt enforcing a minimum recycled content in product design and application production?
Hello? It's a very good question and a very good suggestion. We have thought about it, but not really like worked at this stage in that way. In fact, in so many, other regulations relating to, procurement by our public sector organizations and other agencies of the state government or of the union government, there are, regulations which like stipulate minimum content for MSMEs and such kind of entities. But I think recycling is one idea whose time has really like come, and like probably through like platforms like this, where this kind of an ideation will start, and probably like dialogue inside the ministry and inside all other stakeholders, like especially in the say Minister of Environment. And in other like other relevant ministries, so hopefully it should also see a light of the day in some time in the future. But like we really need to like start speaking about this. I really appreciate you taking it up. Thank you.
Thank you for that positive answer, and we remain hopeful that at some point in time the ministry helps us in sort of enforcing this. I think the overarching messages that the government gives out, I think this will be one step forward towards that direction. I know I'm running out of time. I probably have a minute and a half, so I'm going to open up question and answers to the audience. Like if anybody has any question, please raise your hand from the audience and I'll come right to you. Any questions for our panelists, our presenters here? Well, I think a lot of it has already been covered, so I don't see any questions. Did I see anybody out there? I think no questions, so I think a lot of information was already covered, and I think everybody is satisfied with what they had to hear and see on the screens. So moving on, as I said, that this particular session is divided into two parts. We're going to now bring on copper alloys, and for this I would like to invite Mr. Aurobindo Gyan to come up on stage and take over from here. He's going to be talking about copper. So thank you, Matt. But before we come up, I just want to present the mementos, and I'll invite Jinesh Bhai, Naveen ji, if you can please come up on the stage and give mementos to our panelists and presenters.